It was too early for a phone call. The light creeping through the blinds in my small downtown apartment felt like it wasn't supposed to be there yet. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with my dad's name, Jim. I blinked, confused. He didn't call unless something was wrong, but the tone of his voice when I answered told me it wasn't just any problem. "Kate," he said, formal, clipped, like I was a client instead of his daughter. "Can you come by the house today?" "We need to talk." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. There was something in his voice that made my skin crawl. When my dad was serious, it was like the world narrowed down to just the two of us, and it never meant anything good. "Yeah, I'll be there," I said, keeping it simple, though my heart was already pounding. I wasn't sure what I expected when I pulled up to my parents' house, but it definitely wasn't the way it felt. The house, always so warm and full of life, was quiet. Too quiet. The silence in the air felt thick, like something had been waiting to be said for a long time. Mom and Matt were in the living room, both of them looking at me with blank expressions, like they were waiting for a verdict. My dad stood by the window, hands behind his back. The air felt charged, like a storm was about to hit. Dad didn't waste time. "We've been talking," he began, his voice like steel. "About your house. The one you're building with Brian." He blinked. My heart skipped a beat. "What about it? It's too much, Kate. The price, the plans, all of it." He paused, and when he spoke again, it felt like a punch to the gut. "We're not going to pay for it. We won't be covering the costs anymore." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "What?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. "You're serious?" "Serious as a heart attack," he said. "This house? It's a waste. You're throwing money away on something that doesn't make sense." I couldn't understand what he was saying. The house was my dream. Brian and I had worked so hard for this. But it wasn't just the house. It was the way they were talking about my career. About me. Mom chimed in then, her voice soft but firm. "Kate, we've been worried about you. About the choices you've been making. Brian, your career, it's just not enough." My mind was reeling, but the words that followed kept crashing down on me. "You need someone who can support you," my dad said, his tone absolute. "Someone who can secure your future." These decisions, Kate, they're just poor ones. I felt the sting in my chest, the humiliation of their words settling deep. It wasn't just about the house. It was about everything they thought I'd failed at, everything they believed I couldn't do on my own. I didn't know what to say at first. The words were stuck in my throat, thick with disbelief, like they couldn't quite make it out. My dad's face was set, the muscles in his jaw tight, and for a second, I thought maybe it was all some kind of sick joke. But the way my mom was looking at me, blank, not even an ounce of warmth, told me it wasn't. They meant it. I glanced down at the folder my dad had opened on the coffee table, its thick stack of papers looking like a graveyard for everything I'd been working for. He flipped through it, one page after another, like it was no big deal. "Here," he said, tossing one document on the table in front of me. "The contractors are canceled. You're not going forward with this house." I was frozen. My heart was hammering so loudly in my chest, I almost couldn't hear the words. "You canceled the contractors?" I repeated. My voice quiet but edged with disbelief. "Without even telling me?" "Didn't seem necessary," he said, his eyes flicking to mine for a brief second. "You were going to waste money on a pipe dream. It's better this way." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just done. Matt, who'd been sitting there with his arms crossed like he was watching a movie, opened his mouth. "Well, looks like your big career isn't all it's cracked up to be, huh? Maybe this is just what happens when you chase pipe dreams and forget the real world." I shot him a look, but he was too busy smirking to notice. The words hit harder than they should have, coming from him. Matt had always been the golden boy, the one who didn't have to fight for anything, the one who had it easy, and now he was mocking me like my entire life was a joke. I could feel the tears rising, but I didn't let them spill. I wasn't going to let him see me break. "What do you mean, pipe dream?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm working. I'm building something. You think it's a joke because you don't get it, Matt. You don't understand how hard I've worked for any of this." He just laughed, like I was a kid talking about some imaginary friend. "Sure, keep telling yourself that. I'm sure Brian's pulling in the big bucks, huh?" How are you going to keep this up without a backup plan? Your career isn't even stable. The anger boiled inside me, hot and sharp. I could feel the pressure in my chest, but I wouldn't let it take me down. I focused on my dad instead, looking at him with everything I had left. Dad, why the hell didn't you talk to me before making this decision? This is my life. I'm the one paying for this house. I'm the one who's been working, really working, so I can have a future. Not you, not Mom, me. His gaze didn't soften. You don't understand, Kate. You're too focused on what you want, and not on what's practical. You need to think about stability, about security. Brian can't give you that. You need to wake up and see that stability, I said, my voice rising. What do you think I'm building then? I've been doing this for years. I didn't ask you for help. I didn't need you to pay for the house. But now, you've decided for me that I'm not capable of making my own choices. He didn't flinch, didn't back down. You need someone who can provide, Kate. That's the reality. Brian's a nice guy, but he's not enough. You're fooling yourself if you think you can make it on your own. Mom nodded slowly. Her lips pressed together like she was holding back something. I thought she might say something, anything, but when she finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. We're just trying to help you, sweetheart. We've seen this before, you know. You always make these big decisions without thinking about the consequences. I wanted to scream. To tell them how wrong they were, how they'd been undermining me for years, but I didn't. Instead, I stared at them, at the people who were supposed to support me, and realized they never really had. They just wanted me to follow the path they had planned for me, whether I liked it or not. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm not your version of what I should be. I'm not going to settle for someone who doesn't believe in me. You want me to stay small, to rely on someone else because that's what you think is safe. But I'm not going to live that way anymore. I could feel the tension crackle between us, like a line had been drawn in the sand. Dad's expression hardened, and he shook his head. You're making a mistake. All this pride, all this independence, it won't get you anywhere in the end. The words stung, but I refused to let them break me. I stood up, my hands trembling, and took a step toward the door. I'm done. I can't be here for this anymore. There was no apology, no attempt to fix it, just silence. My family had already made up their minds. I wasn't their little girl anymore. I was something to be fixed. And maybe they were right about one thing. I wasn't who they thought I was. I could barely breathe as I stepped into the car, the air in the driveway still thick with the weight of everything that had just been said. The door slammed behind me, and I turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life. But the sound didn't drown out the buzzing in my ears. I drove away slowly, trying to focus on the road, but my mind was spinning. Everything that had just happened felt like it was unraveling me from the inside. My family's rejection stung harder than I expected, and it was hard to tell what hurt more. The fact that they dismissed my work, my life, or the way they looked at me like I was a failure. The disbelief was wearing off, but the ache was just beginning to settle in deep, where I couldn't ignore it. I glanced at the dashboard, trying to steady myself, but all I could think about was what they'd said. You need someone who can support you, someone who can secure your future. Was that really what they thought of me? Was that how little they believed in me? I shook my head, feeling the sting of their words sinking deeper. The silence in the car felt suffocating, and before I could stop myself, I pulled out my phone. A message from Brian popped up. How'd it go with your parents? I stared at the screen for a second, my heart in my throat. I hadn't even told him I was going over there. What could I say? Hey, so my parents basically think I'm making a huge mistake with my life, and they don't want to help me build a house anymore. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to reply yet. He'd been so excited about the house, about everything we'd been building. How could I tell him that it was all falling apart? I pushed the thoughts aside as I turned into the parking lot of my apartment. The space was cramped, but I didn't care. I needed a moment, just a breath. I didn't want to go inside yet, not when everything felt so broken. I sat in the car for a minute, letting the cool air from the AC settle in around me, forcing my mind to focus. I needed control. I couldn't let this mess define me. I pulled my phone back out and dialed my assistant, my fingers shaking just a little. Hey, it's Kate. I need you to pull all the project files for me, the big ones. I need to know where we stand with the biggest client right now, and make sure everything's running smoothly. I tried to keep my voice steady, even though I could hear how sharp it sounded. The last thing I needed was to break down over the phone, but I had to do something. I had to take charge again. "Got it," she said, calm and professional, as always. "I'll send them over to you right away." I ended the call and leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes. I tried not to think about my parents or their criticism. I couldn't afford to let it chip away at everything I'd worked for. I let out a breath, feeling a little lighter. The house, the wedding, the future, it could all wait. I'd been doing this alone for years, and I'd kept my head above water. My family didn't get it, but that was their problem, not mine. They could talk all they wanted. They could try to tear me down. But the truth was, they had no idea what I was capable of. I slammed the door to the car, suddenly more determined than I'd felt all day. I wasn't going to let them decide who I was. I was going to finish what I started. And when the time came, I'd show them just how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke up with that knot still in my stomach. But I wasn't going to let it drag me down. The anger, the frustration. It was all building up inside me like a storm I could feel brewing in my chest. I wasn't about to let my parents or anyone else control my life. Not anymore. By the time I pulled into the parking lot at work, I was fired up. I didn't have time for second guessing or self-doubt. I needed to take action. My future, wasn't up for debate anymore. The first thing I did when I sat at my desk was dial up the legal team. I didn't waste time, no pleasantries, just straight to business. "Hey, it's Kate. I need some advice," I said, already pulling up the contracts for the house on my screen. If someone in my family makes decisions on my behalf without consulting me, specifically about financial matters like canceling contractors, what are the consequences? The silence on the other end of the line was only brief before they responded. "Well, if they're making decisions tied to a contract you signed, you could have grounds for breach of contract depending on the specifics." I felt a jolt of something sharp and hot in my gut. "What about cancellation penalties? If they've pulled the plug on something I'm responsible for?" "They could be liable for those penalties if they've interfered," the lawyer said. "But you'd need proof that they made those decisions without your consent. And, of course, it would depend on what the clauses in your contract state." I felt my hands tighten around the phone. Proof. I knew I had that. And if they thought they could just walk all over me, they had another thing coming. "All right, thanks," I said, already moving to the next task. I hung up, heart still pounding. But it was a good kind of adrenaline. I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. I started scanning through the contract, carefully looking for any clause about cancellations or penalties. My eyes went straight to the section about changes to the project timeline, and there it was. A solid clause about penalties for unauthorized alterations. It wasn't much, but it was enough. My parents had no idea how deep they were in this. Once I had everything I needed, I shot off an email to my team at the agency. No time for niceties, just the facts. "Team, we are moving forward with the next stage of the Sunstream project. I want everyone prepped, all hands on deck. No matter what anyone says, this project is happening." I could practically hear the energy shift as I hit send. I wasn't going to let them destroy everything I'd built. I'd earned this. Every part of it. My team knew how to move fast, and they'd support me, just like they always did. The building started to feel a little smaller, a little more like mine. And then, as if the universe was giving me a sign, my phone buzzed. It was Brian. "Hey, you all right? I can tell something's off. We need to talk about what happened with your parents. I'm here for you, always." My fingers hovered over the screen, and for a second, I thought I'd keep it short, but I couldn't. Not after everything. I took a breath and typed back, telling him the truth. "They pulled out of the house project. They think I'm making bad decisions. They're trying to force me to back down." I hit send, biting my lip. I didn't know how he'd take it, but it had to be said. The reply came fast. "What the hell? That's messed up. I don't get it, Kate. I know you've been working your ass off for that house. But listen, I've got your back, okay? Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. I'll stand by you." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Brian always knew how to calm me down, how to remind me what really mattered. But this was bigger than just him and me. This was my future, and I couldn't keep letting my family have a say in that. I hit the desk with my fist, a sudden burst of energy pushing through me. This wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. This was about me owning my choices, building my life without their strings attached. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that old fire flicker back to life. I wasn't going to let them control me, not anymore. The phone rang the next morning, and I knew without looking at the screen exactly who it was. The moment I saw my dad's name flash, that familiar tightness hit my chest. I took a second to breathe, steadying myself before answering. "Kate," he said, his voice already full of that familiar, angry edge. "What the hell is going on with you? You've made a mess of everything. I'm not going to let you throw your life away like this." I didn't flinch. "What are you talking about, Dad?" "You know damn well what I'm talking about," he snapped. My pulse quickened, but I forced my tone to stay even. "I'm not canceling anything, Dad. I've already told you. I'm moving forward with my plans. My life isn't up for your approval anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him seething. When he spoke again, it was more measured, but still cold and harsh. "You owe it to the family, Kate. You can't just ignore us. We've been here, trying to help you, and you throw it all in our faces. You need to put us first." My hands tightened around the phone. His words stung, but they weren't enough to make me back down. "I've been putting everyone else first my whole life, Dad. And where has that gotten me? I'm not doing it anymore." I heard him let out a frustrated breath. "This is arrogance, Kate. This is you throwing away everything we've worked for. You're ungrateful, and you've become someone I don't even recognize." He trailed off, and I could almost feel the weight of his disappointment. "Maybe you don't recognize me because I'm finally figuring out who I am," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to keep living my life by your outdated rules, Dad. It's not your life to control anymore." The silence on the other end was deafening, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're making a huge mistake, a massive one, and I won't sit back and watch you destroy your future over this arrogance." I bit back the urge to snap at him, to yell and scream like I wanted to, but I couldn't let him see that weakness. "It's not arrogance, Dad. It's me choosing my own path, the same one you've been trying to control for years. I've made my own choices, and I'm not going back on them." "You're a child," he said, his voice sharp, like he was losing control. "You've never understood how hard the world really is. You think you can just do whatever you want and everything will fall into place. But it doesn't work like that. You need someone who can guide you, someone who can show you the right way." I felt my chest tighten, the weight of everything they'd ever said to me pressing down like a vice. It wasn't just about the house or the business anymore. It was about everything, about how my life had always been about their expectations, not mine. How they'd always been the ones making the decisions for me, whether I realized it or not. "Dad, I'm done being guided by you," I said, my voice firm, my heart pounding. "This is my life, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else pull the strings anymore. Not on the house, not on my career, not on me." There was another long silence, and I could feel the tension through the phone. Finally, he spoke again, but this time, his voice was colder, calmer. "I don't know what happened to you, Kate, but I'm not giving up on you. I'm coming over, and we're going to sit down and talk this through." My heart slammed in my chest. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. I'd had enough. "No," I said, the word sharp, like a line drawn in the sand. "I'm not meeting with you. I've made my decision, and I'm not going to be talked out of it." He exhaled, a frustrated, resigned sound. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, like he was trying to reach me. "I won't," I said, and this time I was sure. "I'm done being manipulated. This is my life, and I'm not going to live it by anyone else's rules anymore." With that, I hung up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the crushing weight of their expectations. I felt free, and I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let them or anyone pull me back down. The next day, I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, but not really seeing the designs for the Sunstream project in front of me. I had work to do, sure, but my mind kept drifting back to my parents, to the conversation with my father that still echoed in my head like a dull, insistent thrum. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The way they'd always seen me as incapable, as someone who needed to be saved or fixed. It wasn't just insulting, it was suffocating. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to shake off the frustration. I had to focus. The project was important, but this was personal. I pulled up the financials for the agency and glanced through them, making sure everything was on track with the big client. Everything was solid, and a small part of me felt that old sense of pride I hadn't felt in a while. I'd built this, every bit of it, from the ground up. But then, I started to think about what my parents didn't know, what they'd never known. They thought I was struggling, that I couldn't make it on my own. They had no idea how far I'd come, how independent I'd really become. They had no idea that I wasn't asking for their money or their help because I didn't need it. I reached for my phone and dialed my assistant. "Hey, it's Kate. I need you to pull my financial reports, all of them. I want to see the breakdown of my income from freelance work, business investments, everything." I could almost hear her typing on the other end of the line. "Got it. I'll send them over right away." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers on the desk. I knew this would be a risk, but I didn't care anymore. My parents had underestimated me for the last time. They thought I was still that unsure girl trying to prove she could make it in the world, but I wasn't. The reports came through a few minutes later, and I opened them quickly, scanning the numbers. I was sitting on more than enough to fund the house, more than enough to live the way I wanted. The investments were paying off, the projects were thriving, and my freelance income was steady. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I felt a knot in my stomach, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something stronger, something I hadn't felt in years, the power of knowing my worth. Taking a deep breath, I dialed my dad's number. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative anymore. When he picked up, his voice was tight, still filled with that cold frustration. "Kate, you need to fix this. You know you're making a huge mistake. I don't know what happened to you, but I'm not backing down." I steadied myself. "No, Dad. You're the one who doesn't get it. You don't get me." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low, almost exasperated sigh. "What are you talking about now?" I let the silence drag on for a second, giving him just enough time to feel the weight of my words. Then, I dropped it. "I've been financially independent for years, Dad. I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. I've built a business from nothing. I'm sitting on a solid portfolio, and I'm doing just fine without your help. In fact, I've been doing just fine for a long time." There was a long silence, and I could practically hear him processing it, the words sinking in like a stone. "What?" he finally said, disbelief clear in his voice. "I'm not the girl you think I am," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I don't need to rely on anyone, least of all you. You've been underestimating me for so long, but I'm done with that." I could hear him struggling to find the right words. He stammered for a second, then tried to cover it up with his usual bluster. Kate, I didn't know. I mean, why didn't you tell us?" "Because you never asked," I snapped, the frustration building again. "You never wanted to know the truth. You just assumed I was still that girl who needed saving." He cleared his throat. "I didn't mean it like that, Kate. I just want you to be happy." I laughed, bitter. "You want me to be happy? Then you should have respected my decisions a long time ago. I'm not some project for you to fix, Dad. I'm a grown woman with my own life. I've made my own way. And for once, I wish you could be proud of that, instead of telling me what to do." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but still tinged with that old authority. "I don't know what to say, Kate." I pushed forward, not giving him the chance to backpedal. "Then say this. Take back the things you said. Take back the way you've treated me. And apologize. Because you've got it all wrong, I can't just undo what I said," he murmured, sounding defeated. "But I never meant to hurt you." "Then show me," I said, my voice hard. "Show me you're sorry by respecting my choices. I'm done letting you control my life." He didn't respond. I could hear him breathing on the other end, his mind clearly racing. And then finally he sighed. "I don't know how to fix this, Kate." "Then don't," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm done waiting for you to fix me. I'm doing just fine on my own." With that, I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to speak the truth. And for the first time, I wasn't apologizing for who I was. A few hours later, the phone rang again. The number flashed on the screen. Jim. I wasn't ready to talk to him, but I didn't get a choice. I hit answer, my finger heavy with the weight of what was coming. Kate, he said, his voice calmer this time, almost cautious. We need to talk. I didn't say anything right away. I was still trying to control the heat rising in my chest, the anger that wanted to spill out like fire. But I knew this conversation was different. It was different because he knew something had changed, something he couldn't control anymore. We need to fix this, he continued, his tone softer now. I can see that I've misunderstood things. Now that I know how successful you really are, I realize we've been wrong about everything. We just want what's best for you, Kate. We're sorry for the way we treated you. His words weren't enough to make me forget how many times they'd dismissed me, belittled my choices, and assumed I couldn't stand on my own. But I stayed calm, taking a deep breath before I spoke. So now that you know I'm successful, you want to make it right? I asked, the sarcasm leaking into my voice. What if I wasn't successful, Dad? What if I was still struggling? Would you have treated me the same way? There was a pause. I could almost hear him fumbling for the right response. His silence said everything I needed to hear. The truth was, if I were still scraping by, they wouldn't have cared about my dreams or my happiness. They would have kept trying to fix me. I don't know, he said, his voice uncertain. But Kate, you have to understand. We've always been worried about you, about your future. We just want you to be happy. To be secure, do you? I asked, my voice low but steady. Do you really want me to be happy? Or do you just want me to be what you think I should be? His words stumbled over themselves. We've always been there for you, Kate. You know that. We just want to help. And now that we know what you've accomplished, we can help? I cut him off, my heart pounding. That's what this has always been about, hasn't it? You helping me. But it's never been about me, Dad. It's always been about what you think I need, what you think I can handle. If I didn't meet your expectations, you wouldn't even care. You'd just keep telling me I wasn't good enough. The silence stretched, thick and heavy between us. I could hear him trying to process everything, trying to find something to say that could fix it. But he wasn't getting it. I don't think you understand, he said after a long pause. We can still fix this. We can still reinstate the house project. We can fix the wedding plans. We can make everything right again. I felt a cold rush run through me. The final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. This wasn't about me. It was about him, about his control, about their expectations. The wedding, the house, everything. They didn't care about my happiness. They only cared about their version of it. I shook my head, the words coming out sharp, firm. No, Dad. The wedding and the house are still going ahead, but not the way you want. It's my life, and I'm doing it my way, without you in the middle of it. I let that sink in. I could almost hear him choking on the words, trying to wrap his head around the fact that I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. I can't believe you're doing this, he said, his voice almost pleading. You're just going to walk away from us? I could feel the tension in my chest, but I didn't back down. I'm done living for your expectations, Dad. There was no apology from him, no change in the tone of his voice that suggested he understood. Just a long, quiet exhale on the other end of the line. I swallowed hard, the weight of everything pushing down on me. You don't get to control my life anymore, I said, my voice final. This is my choice, my future, and I'm done living for you. And with that, I hung up. I let the phone fall on the desk, feeling a strange calm wash over me. It was over. I had finally made my stand. And I wasn't going back. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur. I kept my distance from my parents, despite their attempts to worm their way back into the plans. The constant messages, the subtle pressure, none of it worked. They wanted to act like everything could be fixed, like I could just bend to their will one last time. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. I spent most of my time focusing on the details of the wedding, making sure everything was exactly how I wanted it. The venue was booked, the guests had been invited, and the plans were set. But there was a shift now. It wasn't just about marrying Brian, it was about doing this for me, in a way I'd never been able to before. I remember getting a text from him one morning, his message brief but full of that concern I didn't know how to explain. Hey babe, What's going on? You've been distant lately, and I can tell something's off. I'm sorry you're dealing with all this family mess. I just want you to know, no matter what happens, we're in this together. I'm with you. I sat there staring at the screen for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I hadn't told him about the fallout with my parents, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't want him to feel caught in the middle. But he deserved the truth, just as I deserved to feel supported. I typed back quickly. The wedding's still going ahead. Same venue, same day. The only difference is, my family won't be there. I didn't wait for his reply. I couldn't. I was already too deep in my own thoughts, trying to piece together a future that didn't depend on anyone's approval but my own. The day of the wedding arrived faster than I expected, and as I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself in the dress I'd chosen, the one that made me feel like the woman I'd become, not the girl they tried to hold back, something shifted inside me. I felt free. I wasn't doing this for my parents, for anyone else. This was mine, all mine. When the doors of the venue opened and I stepped into the light, I felt every pair of eyes on me, but it wasn't that old nervousness I used to feel. This was different. It was a calm certainty. The only people in that room who truly mattered were the friends who had been by my side, the ones who knew me, the ones who had supported me in a way my family never had. Brian stood at the front, smiling that smile that always made my heart skip a beat. The man I was marrying, the one who had never once made me feel small or incapable. It was all coming together now, the dream I'd built with him, the life we were about to share. I walked down the aisle without any lingering doubts or regrets. Every step felt like a declaration that I was finally choosing my own path. And when I reached the altar, Brian took my hands in his, and I knew there was no going back. This was right. This was my life. The ceremony was everything I wanted. Simple, intimate, and full of love. As we exchanged vows, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. How many times I'd doubted myself, worried about what others thought. But now, in this moment, I knew it didn't matter. This was my choice, my decision, and it was exactly what I needed. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and celebration. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. My phone buzzed throughout the night, a constant stream of missed calls and messages from my family. But I didn't need to listen. I didn't need to hear their apologies or their guilt-ridden pleas. I deleted them without a second thought. They had no place here, not anymore. I spent the rest of the night surrounded by friends who had always supported me, who had seen the real me, the woman I'd become, and I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was my life, and no one was going to take that from me. As the night wore on, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't carrying around the weight of my family's expectations, their control. It was just me and Brian, starting a new chapter, with nothing but the freedom to be who we truly were. And that, for the first time in my life, felt like home. 6 months after the wedding, I got the letter. It came on a crisp late afternoon, tucked in the usual pile of bills and flyers that cluttered my mailbox. I almost tossed it, but something about the neat, formal handwriting stopped me. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I opened it slowly, already bracing myself for whatever was inside. The letter was a page long, and as I read through it, my stomach twisted with a mix of disbelief and something I couldn't quite name. It was an apology. My father was apologizing. He'd written about his regret over how he'd treated me, praised my work ethic and business savvy. Words I'd never heard from him, not like this. He admitted that he hadn't understood my choices, that he'd been wrong about me, and begged for a chance to reconnect. I read it through once, then twice. I could hear his voice in every word. The same man who had tried to control me my whole life, now reaching out with a version of himself that was foreign to me. But the truth was, I wasn't moved. I wasn't angry, either. I'd already moved past him, past the need for his approval, and I wasn't about to turn back now. I stared at the letter, my fingers still holding it tightly, but I knew exactly how I was going to respond. I grabbed a piece of paper and in my usual sharp, to-the-point way, I wrote my reply. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. I folded the paper, stuffed it in an envelope, and mailed it off. That was it. I was done. A year later, I was sitting at my desk, organizing project files for the design agency, when a notification popped up on my phone. It was a LinkedIn message from Matt. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart strangely still. His message was a far cry from the smug, dismissive tone he'd used in the past. He said he'd grown as a person and apologized for his actions. He also mentioned he was looking for job opportunities and asked if there were any openings in my company. I snorted a little at that. The audacity. After everything, after how he'd treated me, now he wanted to come crawling back. I didn't even think twice. I clicked on his profile and opened the resume he'd attached. It was just as entitled and self-serving as I remembered him. Without a word, I forwarded the resume to HR with a short note. Please file under Do Not Hire. Then I put my phone down and got back to work. The weight of that decision didn't sit heavy in my chest. It felt right, like I was drawing a line in the sand, keeping my boundaries firm. Later that night, as I sat on the couch with Brian, sipping wine and watching a movie in our beautiful home, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. We had our own place now, everything we'd worked for coming together in ways I never thought possible. It wasn't just about the house or the career. It was about the peace I felt, the freedom. I wasn't going to let anyone, family or not, bring me back into that toxic cycle. My life was mine to live. Brian squeezed my hand, and I looked at him, smiling. He knew, he understood. He always had. And in that moment, I was certain. The life we had built together was the one that mattered, and nothing was going to take that from me.